has had a great couple weeks. I know it's been a couple weeks since I've spoken to everybody, and hope everyone had a great holiday season. And obviously, Happy New Year to everyone out there. Um, just wanted to make sure I'm live, and yep, looks good. Okay, yeah, so I'm live. All right, so yeah, how's everybody doing? Hope everyone had a great New Year. Hope everyone had a great holiday season, like I said. And I'm fired up, guys. I'm fired up. I mean, we got a ton to get to. Um, Geez, there's just so much to get to that I've missed, and so much that has been going on in the last couple of weeks that I wanted to kind of hit on here. What are we going to go through? We're going to talk about the Yankees, obviously. We're going to talk about how Edward Cabrera signed elsewhere. We're going to talk about the continued just inactivity of the New York Yankees and a couple ideas I might have that could, come in replacement of Edward Cabrera, and obviously the continued standstill between the Yankees and Cody Bellinger. We're going to talk about the Knicks, who have finally, for the first time this year, hit the skids. 4 straight losses, obviously, and who have been struggling since the NBA Cup. We're going to talk about the Jets a little bit, obviously, because we've got to talk about all New York teams on this show, and obviously the Jets finished off their season and have the number 2 overall pick, and potentially could be in a position to take a franchise quarterback. So we will discuss that. But we begin obviously with the biggest story right now in New York sports, and that is the New York Giants. And the Giants, obviously, the news came out, right after the season, the day after the season ended, that the Giants were keeping Joe Schoen as their GM, and they were going to begin the head coaching search. And listen, I have some thoughts on Joe Schoen. I don't think they're somewhat pertinent, and I will get to those in a little bit. But as for the decision to retain Joe Schoen, I think I don't have really a ton on that. I think the reality is he should have been fired. He probably should have been fired last year. But at this point, we got to look forward. And what happened over the course of the last couple days was a major change in the Giants coaching search happened, and that is that John Harbaugh was fired by the Baltimore Ravens after they obviously lost on the game losing field goal by Tyler Loop against the Ravens, against the Steelers, excuse me, and obviously the Ravens missed the playoffs. The Steelers win the AFC North, and John Harbaugh is now a free agent, and John Harbaugh obviously is the most coveted coach on the market, and he is a guy who obviously obviously the Giants have huge interest in, and why wouldn't they? He obviously is at the top of their list, but he's at the top of a lot of teams' lists. And the Giants have been interviewing a bunch of guys. They've been requesting to interview a bunch of guys. They requested to interview Clint Kubiak, the Seahawks offensive coordinator. They requested to interview Lou Anarumo, who is a Long Island native or a Staten Island native, I think, and he was the Colts defensive coordinator. They requested to interview Vance Joseph, who is currently the defensive coordinator of the Broncos. They requested to interview Raheem Morris, who is who was just fired by the Atlanta Falcons and was the former DC of the Rams. They also requested to interview Mike McCarthy and Kevin Stefanski. And we're gonna get we're gonna get to McCarthy and Stefanski later. But the reality is this: the only coach, the only hire for the New York Giants is John Harbaugh. You talk about a guy that the minute, day one, that he walks into your locker room, the minute he walks into those doors, immediately commands the respect of the room. Something that the Giants have not had in years for a head coach. The minute he steps in, he immediately commands everybody's respect. You talk about a guy who was able to hire coordinators. Went out and hired Todd Monken 3 years ago from the collegiate ranks. The last 3 years, the Baltimore Ravens offense has been ranked 3rd, 4th, and this year 11th. And oh, by the way, this year, Lamar Jackson missed a quarter of the season. And Tyler Snoop Huntley was playing quarterback for the majority of those 4 games. You talk about a guy who was able to hire coordinators. Wink Martindale as a defensive coordinator for many years, who had a long, successful run in Baltimore. This is a guy who, wherever he has been, this is a guy who is, he's obviously only been in one place. This is a guy who has had consistent success wherever he has, throughout his tenure in Baltimore. He has been a guy who has consistently won, no matter the circumstances. He won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. He got Lamar Jackson. Okay, Lamar Jackson, when he came into the NFL, people had questions. Hey, is Lamar Jackson going to be able to play, quarterback at a high level in the NFL? His culture, his system, the coordinators he hired allowed Lamar Jackson to flourish into a two-time Super Bowl MVP, into a two-time MVP. This is a coach that is the best coach, hands down, on the market. This is the best coach that the Giants have had if they were able to hire him since Tom Coughlin. It's a slam dunk hire. It is a slam dunk hire. There really is nothing else to say about it. If John Harbaugh is available, you go get him. You do whatever you have to do as an organization to go get him. And that's the reality with the Giants. They have an opportunity here to finally, after all these years of, quite frankly, failure, get some credibility back in their organization and hire a coach like John Harbaugh. It would be something that, it would be one of the better moments for the Giants of the past 10 years of Giants football. It really would be. Because, again, instant credibility. A guy who has fostered an offense that has led to incredible success from the quarterback. Incredible. And, a lot of people talk about, sorry, I'm just opening up this chat feature here. Let's see. Yeah, Harbaugh to Big Blue. Yeah, I mean, thanks for the comment. It's, he's the only hire. And, a lot of people about Jim Harbaugh, it's very interesting. John Harbaugh, excuse me. A lot of people talk about, well, look at the late game management. Look at how he struggled at the end of these seasons, right? And look at how his seasons end. Well, let's go through how his seasons ended. Seriously, right? You want to go back to Buffalo last year in the playoff game in the divisional round when Lamar Jackson couldn't hold on to the football, and then when they finally did hold on to the football, they got down to they got down for the 2-point conversion, and Mark Andrews has the ball right in his hands and he drops it? Is that on John Harbaugh? How about this year? They lead the drive down the field. They're in field goal range. Now, again, you want to say, well, he should have gotten closer. It's a 40-yard field goal for a kicker that clearly has a big enough leg to make a kick from 55, 60 yards. You're going to blame him for Tyler Loop missing the field goal at the end of the Raven game? Really? That's his fault? That's John Harbaugh's fault? How about the AFC Championship game a couple years ago against the Chiefs? Zay Flowers catches the ball over the middle. He's diving for the goal line. He fumbles it through the end zone. It's a touchback in a game that was very winnable for the Ravens. That's John Harbaugh's fault? I'm not sitting here telling you John Harbaugh doesn't have flaws. Every head coach who gets let go of has flaws. But we have seen this pattern in the past. A head coach, Andy Reid comes to mind as a great example. A head coach overstays his welcome in an organization. It becomes stale, and the organization moves on to greener pastures, and they hire another coach. But that coach, it doesn't mean that guy is a bad coach. It means that guy overstayed his welcome at the one location. And as we saw with Andy Reid, he went to another location, and obviously all the success he's had in Kansas City. This feels like a similar potential situation for John Harbaugh. Now, part of the issue with John Harbaugh to the Giants is John Harbaugh is probably going to have his pick of the litter as to what opportunity he wants to take. And I found it very interesting that Gary Myers, just before I came on here, reported that Harbaugh's not expected to take any interviews till next week. Now, again, I don't know. There's a lot thrown around. Some people thought that Harbaugh was going to interview with the Giants tomorrow. Now it looks like he's not interviewing until next week. Common sense tells you that John Harbaugh probably wants to look at all the available opportunities. And as we know, there are head coaches who are currently employed that might be fired depending on the result of some of these playoff games over the weekend. Could the Green Bay Packers, for instance, who there's been rumors about a rift going on there between Matt LaFleur and the organization. If Green Bay loses at Chicago, could Green Bay move on from LaFleur? And all of a sudden, Harbaugh becomes available for them. Could the Buffalo Bills, if the Buffalo Bills lose in Jacksonville, could they move on from Sean McDermott? Now, I personally don't believe the Bills are going to move on from Sean McDermott because they just love him there. I mean, why would this year specifically be like, oh, that's the straw that broke the camel's back? I don't see why this year's any different than another year. But hey, maybe they can move on from McDermott. So the point is, it seems to me that John Harbaugh's waiting to see his opportunities, and that's not a good thing for the Giants because if the Green Bay Packers become available, I mean, obviously, right, logic would tell you would go there over the New York Giants who won 4 games last year. So we need to see how this plays out. I don't think that this is anywhere near a slam dunk. I don't. I think this is a situation where, look, it could happen. I think that the Giants want him. But you also have to look at the organizational structure, and this gets into the Joe Schoen thing. John Harbaugh comes from an organization in Baltimore where the ownership is very hands-off. And he's had consistent front office members who have been able to put really good rosters on the field for him. You go to New York, John Mara, as we know, he doesn't make decisions for his GM, but he is certainly involved in the decision-making process, as we saw in Hard Knocks, as we understand. And Joe Schoen has won 7 games in his last 2 years as GM. Now, I think that there's a world where maybe the Packer job doesn't come open, and John Harbaugh looks at Jackson Dart and says, hey, I want to coach that dude. That dude's wired the right way. That dude's wired to be a winner. And he wants to coach Jackson Dart, and maybe after a year, let's say things don't go great between Harbaugh and Schoen. Shane's contract is up, and then Harbaugh basically just picks his GM. I could see that. I could. But, again, I want to just reiterate, there's so many factors still at play here with John Harbaugh. So, yes, John Harbaugh is the hire. He is the only hire for the New York Giants. But we need to see how this plays out. Want to get to a couple other guys, because I think it's really interesting that it really feels to me like the Giants are going to hire an experienced head coach here. It just kind of has that feeling, and it seems like that's when you read the tea leaves, that's the way this is trending. The Giants, I believe today, interviewed Kevin Stefanski, the former Cleveland Browns coach who was fired from the Browns, on Black Monday, and they're interviewing Mike McCarthy, I believe Tuesday of next week. Mike McCarthy, obviously Super Bowl champion head coach with the Packers, and then he coached most previously with the Cowboys. I want to discuss both of these guys briefly. Stefanski, I'm going to start with. You know, it was very interesting when the news broke that Stefanski was fired in Cleveland. Everybody was like, oh, Kevin Stefanski, this is a slam dunk hire. Slam dunk. Go get Kevin Stefanski. He's a great coach. I have concerns with Kevin Stefanski. And the more I read about Kevin Stefanski, I actually get more concerned. The guy he reminds me of in a way is Brian Daboll. Because Brian Daboll was a product of circumstance, right? When things were going well with the quarterback, when he had Jackson Dart in there for the 5 or 6 games he coached them, and when Daniel Jones was playing well in 2022, all was hunky-dory with Brian Daboll. The offense flourished, the team was pretty good, and there were no issues. And the other thing is, when he had Wink Martindale as his defensive coordinator, instead of Shane Bowen, who was an atrocity, he basically had a 500 record as head coach. You look at his record without Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator, it's abysmal. He was a product of circumstance. Kevin Stefanski, don't tell me that this guy is some offensive guru. Because if he's an offensive guru, then how the last 2 years was his offense like 29th and I believe, or 28th and I think 31st in the league. 28th and 31st in the league. Just awful, right? Awful offenses. Now you say, well, it's not his fault. It's not his fault. Yes, the quarterback situation was not good. But don't we give him some modicum of blame for the Baker Mayfield situation? Baker Mayfield went on to Tampa to be extremely successful. You don't think Kevin Stefanski had a hand in getting him out? I think he did. Now, the Deshaun Watson trade, I agree, that was not Stefanski's fault, and that trade kind of nuked the Cleveland Browns organization. But he didn't want Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield went on to have success elsewhere. That's a knock against Stefanski's resume. The other thing that's a knock against Stefanski, it was reported by Paul Schwartz of the New York Post that Kevin Stefanski doesn't want to call plays. Why? Why does he not want to call plays? You know, I hate this, and I saw it with Brian Daboll, and it's why I compared the two. If you want a CEO head coach, hire John Harbaugh. It's not that complicated. If you want a CEO head coach, hire John Harbaugh. Where these coaches fail is they try to be CEOs and they're not CEOs. Kevin Stefanski's superpower is that he's a good play caller, right? That's what got him the Cleveland Browns job. He did a good job in Minnesota calling plays in, I believe, 2019. He called plays early on in his Cleveland tenure when his offense was better. And now you come to New York and you're like, well, I don't want to call plays. And the same thing happened with Brian Daboll. You saw it in Hard Knocks. You saw it in the Jackson Dart video that they released when the Giants drafted him. Brian Daboll's strength was the whiteboard. His strength was X's and O's. He didn't lean into that enough, in my opinion, in New York. And I understand the 1 year he called plays, it was an abject nightmare in 2024. But Brian Daboll came to New York and he tried to be like a CEO. That's not what Brian Daboll is, a play caller. He's an OC. And I think the OCs that you see have success as head coaches, most of them, 90% of them, they're calling their own plays. Liam Cohen, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. So the idea that Stefanski doesn't want to call plays, that's a detriment to me. That is a detriment to me. And again, I'm not sitting here telling you Stefanski would be a bad hire. I'm not sitting here telling you that I would be like apoplectic about hiring Kevin Stefanski. But in no way is that a slam dunk hire. No way. It's just not. Kevin Stefanski, if he was such a brilliant offensive mind, how was his offenses ranked basically dead last in the league over a 2-year period? It does not happen. It does not happen if you're a brilliant offensive mind. So I have concerns about Stefanski. I also have concerns about his leadership ability. I mean, John Harbaugh, no concerns about his leadership ability, right? Stefanski, I have concerns there. One word on McCarthy. I know that everybody, the Fat Mike nicknames, everybody, hates Mike McCarthy for whatever reason. Mike McCarthy, to me, is a better head coach than Kevin Stefanski. Full stop. Like, Mike McCarthy went to Dallas, and I was actually I was listening to something, maybe a week or so ago from Tiki Barber, actually, and he was like, Mike McCarthy went to Dallas and didn't innovate his offense. Well, yeah, he didn't innovate his offense, but have you looked at Dallas's offensive ranks during his 3 years there? Right? 2021, 2020, or during his first 3 years there, 2021, 2022, 2023. He had like a top 5 offense every season. And Dak Prescott, who, pretty good quarterback, he had his best year as a pro under Mike McCarthy. So, I'm not really sure why there's a lot of hatred towards McCarthy. He is a guy who obviously has not won a lot of big games, but he's an offensive-minded coach. He's been able to hire coordinators. We saw him hire Dan Quinn in Dallas, and Dan Quinn is a really good defensive coordinator. And he also worked with Kellen Moore in Dallas, who went on to be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, win a Super Bowl with the Eagles, all those things, right? So, I'm not sitting here telling you Mike McCarthy's my number one choice, but Mike McCarthy would be a very, very good hire for the Giants. This is a guy who has won at multiple stops. And again, don't give me that, he had an amazing roster in Dallas. He had a good roster. But that offense outside of CeeDee Lamb, who else was the receiver on that team? Who were the great receivers that Dak was throwing to in 2023? When Dak was basically an MVP candidate. That happened under Mike McCarthy. That happened. So, I wouldn't hate McCarthy. But anyway, that's the story on the Giants search. To me, it seems like they're going to hire an experienced head coach. I do think that the Harbaugh thing, we need to see how it plays out. Because it would not surprise me if he went elsewhere. We just have to see. Okay, let's pivot to the Yankees. And was listening to Emmanuel Berbari, actually, who does good work for SNY, and I know he's called some Yankee games on the on the radio in the past. Was listening to him over the Christmas break and stuff, and he coined this an offseason of stability for the Yankees. He said this is an offseason of stability. It's an offseason where you have a lot of ascending players on your roster, and you want to give those guys a chance to continue to develop. You already think you have a good team, the whole 9 yards. And I thought about that a lot. Offseason of stability, okay, whatever. But then I thought about ascending players. Who are the ascending players on the Yankees? Cam Schlittler? I'll give you that. Cam Schlittler is an absolute dog. He was a beast last year in the playoffs against the Red Sox. Can't wait to watch Schlittler this year. He's ascending. Ben Rice, I think, is clearly an ascending player, right? Had a good year last year, I think like an 820 OPS or something like that. Obviously, there's still concerns with Ben Rice. Not a great defensive player. We need to see if he can replicate what he did last year offensively. But the reality is Ben Rice, you could say, is an ascending player. Who else is ascending on the Yankees? Anthony Volpe? 3 straight years of a 660 OPS, shoulder surgery in the offseason. Not really thrilled to watch him next year. How about Austin Wells? Is he ascending? Took a step back last year offensively. Completely, kind of tanked in the second half of the year before. I'm not sure he's ascending. Obviously, he could bounce back. I think Wells is a fine player. Not an ascending player. Not someone who you say, oh, this is a guy we're going to build around. Where are the ascending players on the Yankees? Spencer Jones, right? Spencer Jones is ascending. But the Yankees, really the only move they made this offseason was giving Trent Grisham $22 million on the qualifying offer, essentially blocking Spencer Jones from playing on the Yankees next season. So I look at a 26-man roster, I see like 2 guys ascending. So this idea that, just wait, you're going to see a lot of young talent on the Yankees coming up. That argument doesn't really hold water for me anymore. I think it's kind of a bogus argument. And personally, I just don't agree with it. Couple other things on the Yankees. Edward Cabrera, who the Yankees had a lot of interest in, according to reports at least. Cabrera today was traded to the Cubs for Owen Cassey, who I believe is the Cubs' number 1 prospect. Now, it was reported early in this, I think it was Sunday actually, when the Yankees interest in Cabrera first became public. The names being discussed from the Yankees prospect side were not, not huge names. I think the biggest name was Ben Hess, who I think is like the 5th or 6th best prospect in the Yankee system. I don't know the exact ranking of it. And then all of a sudden he gets traded to the Cubs for a number 1 prospect. So very strange what went down there. It was reported by, I think, John Heyman that the Yankees weren't very close to acquiring Cabrera. So I'm not really sure what to think of that. Look, this is the thing with Edward Cabrera. I'm not that bummed about missing out on Cabrera. That's just me. Cabrera for a career 4.07 career ERA. He's only thrown over 100 innings 1 year. Okay, his career high in innings is 138 innings pitched last season. Only been over 100 innings 1 year. Now, you say he's an ascending arm, and I agree. He is a very talented arm. But look at the injury issues with Cabrera. Multiple elbow issues last year. There's rumors that he has potentially a small tear in his UCL. Now, the Cubs obviously were okay with his medicals, and we'll see how that plays out over time. But I'm not really that concerned about passing on Edward Cabrera. Because to me, when you look at the Yankee rotation, they need stability more than upside. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of question marks in the Yankees rotation next year, right? You look at a Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole's great, but Garrett Cole's coming off Tommy John surgery. So you can't really bank on him necessarily being this star pitcher right away when he returns. You look at Carlos Rodon. Carlos Rodon had a good year last year, but Rodon also had an elbow issue last October, and he had surgery in the offseason. He's going to come back, but again, can you bank on that? Clark Schmidt, Tommy John surgery. To me, if you're looking to make an addition to the Yankees rotation, the guy they should go after is Freddie Peralta. The Yankees should go after Freddie Peralta. This is a guy who 3 years in a row has made 30 starts, 3.59 career ERA, 1 year deal. So it's only a 1 year commitment. And I understand the price tag is high, but look, man, make the move. Like, if you want a pitcher and you want a guy who's going to provide stability in your rotation, a guy who's pitched in big games in October the last couple years for the Brewers, a guy who you know is just going to be kind of steady throughout the season, go get Freddie Peralta. That's the guy I would go after. I'm good passing on Cabrera if you go out and get Freddie Peralta, me personally. So I personally would go after Peralta over Cabrera. Now again, the Yankees might not get either. And this has been, you know, I said it on Twitter today. This has been probably the most this has been the worst offseason of the Aaron Judge era. Like, what offseason has been worse than this? I mean, we're January 7th today, and the Yankees haven't made a move. Literally, they haven't added anybody outside the organization. And again, this was a team that had flaws last year, and you've seen the Blue Jays go out and make multiple moves. They got Cease, they got Okamoto, they might get Kyle Tucker, and the Yankees are just kind of sitting here. And with Bellinger, the Yankees are playing a dangerous game with Cody Bellinger, because we act like, oh, you know, we're going to move this at a snail's pace. He's got no offers. You know, no one's going to sign Bellinger. Well, you don't know that. So the Yankees continue to wait and wait and wait, and he'll be there. He'll be there for us. He'll be there for us. What if a team comes in and says, look, I'll give you exactly what you want. I'll give you 6 years, $180 million. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say it does. All of a sudden, what do the Yankees do? They're not apparently in on Bo Bichette. They're not in on Kyle Tucker. What is the pivot if the Yankees lose Cody Bellinger? I understand you don't want to go to 6 years. You don't want, but what is the trade-off? What is the cost-benefit analysis of losing Cody Bellinger in a year offseason of stability? You're trying to kind of run back the same team. How do you do that without the second best hitter on the team in Cody Bellinger? You need him back if you're going to run back the same team. So, I don't know. I just think the Yankees are playing a dangerous game with Bellinger. I think that it's very possible a team comes in. Maybe it's the Mets. Maybe it's the Angels. I don't know who it is. But another team comes in and you lose out. I did want to propose one thing, and then we'll move on. SNY reported that Kyle Tucker could potentially have to take a short-term deal. It has gotten to the point where Tucker's market is so much less robust than people thought it was going to be that he might have to take a short-term deal. If Kyle Tucker takes a short-term deal, why are the Yankees not all over this? Like, I get the fit's not perfect. I get it. But could you imagine if Kyle Tucker signs a deal where there's an opt-out after the first season? Could you imagine that? You basically would be signing Kyle Tucker for a 1 year commitment. So if you're worried about, he can't play left field long term, who cares? If you're worried about, he might not love baseball, who cares? 1 year, you do it. You absolutely do it. This is a player who has been one of the most successful players in baseball early in his career. If he's going to sign a short-term deal, 3 years, $120 million, like the Bregman deal last year, you got to be all over it. Like, why are the Yankees not all over that? And again, I'm not saying the fit's perfect. It's not. But you have a chance to get a player, the talent of, the caliber of Kyle Tucker, to pair with Aaron Judge for the next, and it's not a long-term commitment. How don't you do that? How aren't you banging down the door to do that? I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I just don't get, why the Yankees would not be running to go do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense. Man, like I said, so much to get to. We still got a good amount to go here, which is good though. Yeah, I'm giving you guys might give you guys an hour today. let's go to the Knicks next. And, I was looking this up before the show, and I think it's pretty interesting. The Knicks have obviously hit the skids. They've lost 4 games in a row. And, I don't necessarily think that the world is coming to an end that they've lost 4 games in a row. NBA teams go through peaks and valleys during a season. It's just kind of the way things are. But there was a narrative out there about the Knicks that, the Knicks are so much better off this year. They're doing so much better than they did last year. And, how much greater is this to watch than watching the Tom Thibodeau Knicks and all those things. And, the problem with that is the facts don't back you up, right? So if you look at the Knicks through 36 games last year, they were 24-12. If you look at the Knicks through 36 games this year, they're 23-13. And they had a better net rating last year than they do this year through that time. So why exactly is it better? Now, I understand. Last year, the Knicks were getting blown out by the top teams in the East, Cleveland and Boston. It looked like they had no chance to make the finals. Now, obviously, they ended up beating Boston in the playoffs. And I understand all those things. But before Jalen Brunson got hurt last year in February in LA when he sprained his ankle, the Knicks were going to be a 55, 56 win team, which is about what they're on pace to be this year, maybe even a little less than that. So I don't understand the people who say, well, it's so much better this year. It really isn't. Like, if you look at the facts of it, it's not better, and I just think that, people, this whole experiment, right, bringing in Mike Brown, and again, I don't even know if the issue was necessarily firing Tom Thibodeau. The issue was, well, who are you going to bring in to replace Tom Thibodeau? And they brought in Mike Brown. And Mike Brown has done some good things. I think he's done some bad things. The Knicks defensively this year have been terrible. You're not going to win a championship with the level of defense they've played so far this year. And I think that's certainly worth mentioning. Where I will give Mike Brown credit is this. His usage of the bench has been outstanding. And the blueprint was provided last year by the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who both made the finals. And both were playing like 10, 11 guys a night in the NBA Finals. They were going deep into their bench in these huge games, and guys were fresh, and guys were playing, 28, 29 minutes a night instead of 38 or 39 minutes a night. And that blueprint works. And I think you've got to give Brown a lot of credit for playing the likes of Tyler Kolek and unlocking him, playing Kevin McCullough Jr., playing Mohamed Diawara, right? Playing Ariel Hukporti, playing all those young players who last year under Tom Thibodeau didn't get a lot of time. And where I think what I want to see out of Mike Brown in the postseason is to stick to that. Because I don't want us to get to the postseason and all of a sudden it's okay, we're back to a 9-man rotation. Because the reality is, you saw last year the blueprint from those two teams that were in the finals is play a deep bench. Play guys who are young. Keep your best players rested enough to where they can go out in the fourth quarter and make winning plays. The key will be, though, doing it in the postseason. And I have my doubts that Mike Brown will actually do that when the chips are down in the postseason, because we've seen throughout stretches of this year when guys weren't injured, and a lot of guys are injured right now, where he didn't go deep into his bench. And he didn't, he was playing like an 8 or 9-man rotation. And then all of a sudden he kind of went back to it. I want to see him play a deep rotation in the playoffs, because to me that's going to be the biggest difference between him and Tom Thibodeau. Obviously the offensive scheme, yada yada. But the reality is, if he can play a deeper bench in the playoffs, I think that'll give the Knicks an advantage, because, as I said, that has been the blueprint for NBA teams of the past couple years going on deep runs. Couple more things, and then we'll finish up. Wanted to talk a little bit about the Jets. And, the Jets, congratulations. They executed the tank perfectly, man. I have to give them credit. They executed the tank as well as any team I've ever seen, honestly. They won that game against Atlanta to, I believe, get to 3-9 or something on the season. And, Darren Muji and the brain trust over there just said, pulling the plug. Nope, we're not having any of this. And boy, did they make sure they lost all those games down the stretch. The Jets, in their last 5 games of the season, lost by a combined 134 points, which is 27 points per game. So the Jets, in the last month of the season, were losing by 4 touchdowns on average per game. Again, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a tank executed to the level that the Jets did. Down the stretch of the season. And it got them the number 2 pick. The Giants won the last week of the season. And obviously the Jets lost, and the Jets got the number 2 pick. And that puts them in a position to potentially draft Dante Moore or Fernando Mendoza, whoever doesn't go to the Raiders, basically, will go to the Jets. Assuming Dante Moore declares, which, spoiler alert, I think he's going to declare. And, Jet fans are happy about that. Jet fans say, well, we're finally going to get our franchise QB. And that's great. And I think that Dante Moore is a really exciting prospect, and I think in the right system, he could take off. But that is, to me, the crux of the issue. The right system. Are the Jets really not going to fire Aaron Glenn here? Like, what did Aaron Glenn do during his first year to tell you, yep, this is the guy? Yep, this is the coach that I believe can lead us forward. Because when you bring in a young quarterback, you are bringing a young quarterback into an ecosystem. You're bringing a young quarterback into your organization, and it takes a village to grow that young quarterback. And, Aaron Glenn is a defensive-minded head coach. Tanner Eggstrand, the offensive coordinator, do we have any idea if he's good or not? I don't, right? The offense was pretty terrible this year. Now, I understand not a good quarterback situation, but they went out and paid Justin Fields $20 million. It's not like they said, well, we're not going to have a QB this year. They made an investment in Fields. It didn't work. He was terrible to the point where he got benched. Are you going to bring Dante Moore into that situation and think that he's going to succeed? Under a coach that, the Jets were record-breaking this year. They became the first team since 1933 to not intercept a pass on the season. 1933. They became the first team to not intercept a pass. They were historically bad. And again, the development of a quarterback, you're going to develop that quarterback with Tanner Eggstrand and Aaron Glenn. I don't love it. I personally would love to see the Jets fire Aaron Glenn, go out and get a Clint Kubiak, go out and get a Cliff Kingsbury, someone who actually can run an offense, right? And that guy gets paired with the rookie QB and develops the quarterback. That's what I would do if I was the Jets. Because the idea that, well, you got to give him more than 1 year. Yes, you typically want to give the guy more than 1 year. But again, this is a very unique situation because you are bringing... They're not going to get a veteran quarterback, the Jets. They're not. Who are they going to get? Kyler Murray? Mac Jones? Who are they going to get? They're going to draft a quarterback. And how they develop that quarterback, no matter how many draft picks they have, and they're set up with draft picks. Muji did a great job with the Sauce Gardner trade, with the Quinnen Williams trade. He did a great job. And maybe they find another Sauce Gardner or another Quinnen Williams with those picks. But nothing's going to matter for the Jets, as we saw in their last era of football, which got nuked by Zach Wilson. Nothing's going to matter for the Jets until they actually develop a quarterback correctly. And in my opinion, Aaron Glenn's not equipped to do that. And that's why I would fire him. That's pretty much it. One more thing before we get out of here. The Eli Manning Hall of Fame debate came up, resurfaced over the last couple weeks because Eli was selected as one of the 15 finalists to be in the Hall of Fame, and along with a bunch of other guys like Drew Brees, Luke Kuechly. I think Frank Gore was on it this year, the former running back for the Jets and Colts and a bunch of other teams, obviously the Niners. And obviously the discussion started again, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? And obviously people are on either side of the aisle. You could say I'm biased because I'm a Giant fan. Eli Manning is unequivocally a Hall of Famer. And the reason he's a Hall of Famer is because he checks every box. He accumulated stats over his career because of how durable he was. He never missed a game due to injury. He didn't start one game because Geno Smith started over Eli. Pour one out. That was one of the worst things of all time. But that was the only game he missed in his career, Eli. And because of that, he accumulated touchdowns and yards, and he's basically top 10 in each of those metrics. Top 10 in the history of the NFL. The second reason he's a Hall of Famer is he's a two-time Super Bowl MVP. But more importantly than that, people have this misnomer that Eli Manning got carried through those runs. Oh, the defense. It was the defense. It was David Tyree. It was whatever. The 2011 Giants, go look at that team. Go look at that team. They were not good on the offensive line. They were not good defensively. I believe they were ranked in the 20s on defense. And I think they were like the 32nd best offensive line in the league. They were one of the worst O-lines in the sport. And Eli Manning, not only did he get through the year and have probably the best year of his career, he threw for, I believe, almost 5,000 yards on the season. He won the Super Bowl MVP, beating Tom Brady for a second time. And he went into San Francisco and won. And he went into Green Bay and won. So, never missed a game. Accumulated stats to the point where he's top 10 in touchdowns and yards all time. And he's a two-time Super Bowl MVP. Hall of Famer. There's nothing else to say about it. Whether he gets in this time, or whether he gets in 5 years, or whether he gets in 10 years, Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. And that's the end of the discussion. So that is the show today. Glad that we got to get back here. I can't wait to do these every week. You're going to be getting live streams from me every week going forward as we, go through the next couple months. I mean, there's so much that's going to be going on with the Giants coaching search. That is going to be it's going to be a wild next couple of weeks. With the Giants coaching search and hopefully some of the Yankee offseason stuff heating up. But we will be here to discuss it. Again, follow me on social media, Chris_NYY28. Hope everyone has a good rest of their week, and I'll see you.